Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about From Season 2, Episode 6. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're immediately picking up where the last episode left off, where we had the conversation between Tianchen and Boyd, and Boyd's not trying to make excuses for what Sarah did, because it's like, right, she did something horrible, she took from you and Kenny, and that no one or nothing could ever really bring that back, but he understands what it means to have this place take something you love, which Tien Chen also understands that too, and it's like, she's, like I said, I think she would be the deciding vote, and maybe even Kenny later on could be deciding vote on how they handle the Sarah thing, because for Boyd, it's like, for him, he thought for as long as he had rules about this place, he can kind of keep it under control. It's how he could keep things going. But it's like, that is not the case anymore. Because I think this flows into what Jim has been theorizing about, like, right, what is this place doing? It's a giant experiment. They were running things the way they've been for a while now, and this place did what it did to shake stuff up, because once again, what ended up being a big factor that changed, like, with the Matthews showing up, it wasn't just them. It's never been like multiple group car vehicles showing up at once. So it's like, hey, you had the Matthews showing up, and then you also had like Jade and the other card showing up, which doesn't happen. And even if it has happened, it's like super rare. Now you've also got a bus. Once again, it's about adding pressure. It's about putting them in more dire situations, because even Jim was saying, it's like, right, the food situation being what it is, Donna's trying to ration out as much of the food as they have, but Jim's like, yo, this is enough for maybe a week, because and they're gonna try and like put it in and kind of preserve it as much as possible so they can dole it out so it can last. At least they're going to try for a year, if they can even do that. So it's like, once again, it's pushing these pressure points, putting you in a desperate situation to see how you will react, because this is some giant experiment. So either way, my whole point of going on that diatribe is, I mean, obviously those are key points to the episode, but it's also to the point that Boyd was like, things are changing. Like, the way we run things for so long can't work anymore. The rules I made can't apply anymore, because this ain't the same place. This place is changing in a way that none of us have expected, and it's changed in a way that we've never seen it change over the time we've been here. It's always stayed the same, but things are different now. And so Boyd is like, we got to do whatever we can to get, whatever I can to get people out of here. But obviously, before him and Tien Chen can continue the conversation, Kenny comes in flying off the handle, understandably, and Boyd wants to leave. Like, no, I'm sorry. But Tien Chen was trying to calm Kenny down, because it's like, no, that's okay, that's enough. Because I wondered, did she find out about him flying off on the handle on Sarah the way he did last episode? But I think it's also like, right, she understands where Boyd's coming from, of like, right, this place is what it is. You got to take everything you have. And it's like, the sad thing is, Sarah is a victim in all of this, but it doesn't erase what she did. And that's finding that way forward for her, for everybody. It's going to be like a big thing, you know, if they can't even find a way forward. So there's that element to it. Boyd's about to leave. He goes into the church to talk to Sarah, but the church is completely empty. I'm like, what? I was like, what? And then all of a sudden the music box appeared, and you're like, because Martin had warned him about the music box. It's like, hey, close that or whatever. But Boyd kept letting it play, and he's letting it play every time it pops up throughout the episode. Then there's the ballerina, which I at first was thinking, like, wait, is that the woman that I'm blanking on her name, but wasn't it from like episode 3, the woman that died that had the was that episode 3 or episode 4? The one who had the spike in her head, because those creatures like spiked her head, and was it Kelly? Was that her name? It might be. It might be something like that. I might be misremembering. I first second thought that she was the ballerina, but she wasn't. And then all of a sudden the ballerina had like a whole bunch of worms in her mouth. And I'm like, what the is she supposed to just be a personification of the music box? But it's also about Boyd's thing. And now it's like, okay, so he's already been seeing stuff, which, to be fair, he's not the first person in this place to start seeing stuff. But his stuff is kind of like wild. So he's kind of a little wobbly afterwards, because he had fallen back and hit in his head. So Kenny takes him to go see Christy, and then it's kind of like, obviously it's a little awkward between them. So Kenny's like, no, it seemed like you can go on your own, so I'm gonna go back. but every time Boyd's like reacting to his arm, he's like, all right. And he tells Kenny what ended up happening, but Kenny thinks he's a little crazy, especially because they have introduced it. I don't know if they brought this up last season or not. I don't think they did, but this season they've leaned into like, right. And I didn't know this was something that was a side effect of Parkinson's, is the whole like, oh, you could end up hallucinating thing. But once again, Christy keeps bringing up the point that's not supposed to happen until much later, but it still can happen. So it's not, I mean, once again, you also add in the factors of like, yeah, who also related to Boyd went crazy, and it was Abby. I mean, once again, who also went crazy is Sarah. So it's like, yeah, you've had two examples of stuff you're kind of like, because the Abby stuff definitely happened like after, like Kenny and his family showed up after there. So like Kenny wasn't around for that. Obviously he was around for the Sarah thing because that led to his dad getting killed. But it is a situation of like, they do make their way to Christy, which Christy's got to deal with her own thing because she finds out about Marielle. It turns out Marielle was on her way to a rehab. It's like, oh, you weren't to visit your grandmother. You were to go to rehab. And it's like, wait, when did this start? I wondered if the way Christy made it sound, it almost sounded like she already had pre-existing drug issues, but maybe they had it under control. And then it's like, why did it get worse? She's like, oh, like, she's like a couple months ago. And you're like, right, when Christy disappeared, but she tried to, like, because she didn't want Christy to feel guilty. So she's like, no. Like, it's a combination of many different things. It isn't just on you, but for Christy, it's like, right, because I disappeared, which is beyond your control, it led to her spiraling. So, because a lot of them have no idea what their lives are like back then, especially for everything that they've got, especially for those like Donna who've been here for like 3 years, But, yeah, Marielle had taken the, oh God, the morphine to try and like even herself out. But it's like, she was kind of, then it's that thing of like, when you get pissed at someone gets pissed in return. Cause like, obviously Christy has to be like, no. I gotta lock up all this medication and put it somewhere else. And she's like, don't treat me like a junkie. It's like, but to be fair, she has every right to be nervous because this is all the medication you have. And who knows if and when you'll even be able to go home. So that medication needs to stretch in case someone needs it, which there is a medical emergency later on in the episode. But it's not like she's going to chomp down on everything in there, but it's also still like, yeah, but those urges are still there no matter how much she's saying. I mean, to the point, once again, she took that morphine. She's like, oh, I can put it back. It's like, oh, so she didn't even put it back. She kept it. So I guess she could like microdose herself a little bit just to kind of take off a little bit of that edge from, the withdrawal she's going through. So you're like, geez, it's like, this is the worst place to be. Under those conditions. Once again, it's also about adding pressure. It's like, oh, let's complicate things for Kenny and Christy by throwing in Christy's fiance. Oh, let's complicate things more by being like, hey, Christy's fiance has some drug issues and she's, she is a medical person and she's also with Christy, who is the medic of the town, the doctor of the town, and she's the one that has access to the medication. I wasn't expecting her to find out this soon. I thought that was going to be something that would draw out over the course of the season. Her finding out like that, I was like the episode after we found out, for her to find out too, I thought was so interesting. Like, I had my suspicions like the episode or so before. I was like, is that going to be something? But it's like, no, like they straight up revealed it the next episode. Now Christy found out. I was like, I wasn't expecting that. So it's like, well, Marielle wanted to leave, but she couldn't because it's like, yeah, it's about to be nighttime, so you're stuck here. And I'm like, she's frustrated and pissed because it's a combination of embarrassment because it's like, hey, we just got back together and now you find out about like kind of my dark secret and I didn't want you to, it's for one, she made the whole point last episode of, hey, we haven't changed. We're still the same people. We'll figure everything else out. She was probably hoping that that'll be something that we figure out later on. And now she's worried about the way Christy's going to view her. I think it's what it's like in her eyes. It's like, oh, especially considering like all the medicine and stuff and all the drugs that are around here. You're the medical professional here. Like I don't want you to look at me as like an issue or a concern, something you have to be afraid about. I don't want you to view me as like some junkie. You had Boyd, him and Kenny showing they're up there, and obviously they had the bunker down at the hospital or the facility. And so Boyd is telling Christy everything. And it gave me a better understanding of the Martin thing because it didn't click in my head. So I'm glad, because I'm a dumb. I'm glad that Boyd ended up explaining the whole, like, okay, so those worms inside of him were keeping him alive. They were eating away at him. I guess so that's why they chained him up. I thought, like, because I'm like, why would these things, like, just leave him be? And it's just like something or someone put him there and then, like, had those things inside of him, like, eating him up. Either those are experiments too, or that's just maybe some twisted anomaly with everything that's going on. The reason why they act and work the way they do. But that's the whole point. Martin couldn't die unless you killed him. And he couldn't even officially. That's why he died when he did. Because those things are the only thing keeping him alive. And so now they're passed on to Boyd. And now they're kind of driving him crazy. It's like, right, they're not always visible through his skin. But they're there. He can feel them crawling around. He's seeing the ballerina over and over again. He pulled a gun out on Mario. Luckily, he didn't pull the trigger because that would have been sucky. So gets Kenny worried because Kenny's thinking this is a dementia thing because the same thing happened with his dad. And obviously that means a lot to Kenny because Boyd has been that father figure for him. So it almost feels like history is repeating itself for him. It's like, you know. And even Boyd telling Christy, like, if it comes down to it, if something happens, I don't want to be a danger to anyone. I need you to be the one to put me down. I thought he would have asked. Probably if it was before now, he probably would have put that on Kenny. But especially because I guess it's also like Christy's show, like that is the case because of, like I said, if her name is Kelly, I think it is, but I can't remember. The girl from like episode 3 or 4 that I was referencing earlier with the spike in her head. Her. Christy was the one suggesting, like, right, kind of a mercy killing. So it is kind of on Chris. I guess as a professional, maybe she could make it a little peaceful and not as painful. Or just, I mean, it's interesting too, because let's not forget who was the one that kind of ended up being the one that kind of had to rip it out of her head to kill her, to end her pain, was Boyd. So I think that is kind of interesting, him being the one now in that boat asking Christy to do it for him. She has her reservations about it, but it does feel foreshadowing like it might come down to that. I mean, let's also not forget he's keeping up with that same parallel. He also is the one that ended up stopping Abby from killing more people. He ended up shooting her and killing her before she could kill Ellis. So all the while that's happening, since I referenced the Matthews, just kind of jump to their circumstances really quickly. Donna's over there trying to, like, you know, they need it somewhere away from prying eyes, away from anyone in town and away from anyone in Colony House to kind of, like, you know, prepare this food, which I'm immediately like, oh, dude, this is. I feel like it's going to be a situation where that food is going to get packed away, but the problem is it's going to end up getting destroyed. It feels like they're just set up for failure. Like, all right, we took all the food we have left and we are going to, like, ration it and prepare it so it can be preserved. It's like, it's just ready to be, like, destroyed, I'm sure. Like, something's going to happen. It's like, yeah, like, Jim and Tabitha in particular won't be digging a hole in the basement, obviously, because they're not trying to tiptoe in that situation again. And that's what she tries to tell Ethan, that, right, this new house won't come collapsing down because of that. But it's still a thing of, yeah, but this place loves to fuck with you, so it could easily, like, destroy all your food just for the hell of it. So I'm too concerned about that, but that's kind of in the back of my mind. So it seems like Jim's theory, it seems like he's only shared that with Boyd and Tabitha. Obviously, like, him and Donna talked about the voice, and I don't think him and Donna have talked fully about the whole experiment, like what he brought up to Boyd last episode. He hasn't talked to anyone else about it. Those two seem like to be the only ones. So, like, Ethan and Julia are in the I always do that, Julia or Julie, either way, keeping their children in the dark about all of this. And, you know, Ethan confides in Donna about how he's scared. He told his parents that he was, you know, brave, and, you know, but for him it's like, yeah, I don't want to be on a quest anymore. I want to go home. Which Donna's like, oh, let me tell you a secret. I'm scared too. And she even says that fear is a good thing. And he's like, really? It's like, yeah, fear is kind of in every one of us. It's a natural part of us, just like joy, happiness, and love. But the thing is, fear is important because of fear, it allows us to be brave, you know? Because what is fear? Bravery is being afraid, but doing it anyway, you know? So I thought that was kind of neat. And like, him hugging her like that. And she's like, it's okay. And I was like, that's super sweet. Because Donna's the hard ass in town. And so just in general, I was about to specify because obviously in Colin House, but still like she's the hard ass all across the board. And so getting to see like that, I mean, we've seen that softer side, but she's always handled things with like a tough love approach. Obviously she's not going to go through the tough love approach when it comes to a child. So it's just nice to kind of see that softer side of her in that regard. So we have all that going down. And then we have the shenanigans at Colony House. First and foremost, you could tell something was off between Fatima and Ellis, but he was like, okay, so it's about, I mean, everyone has had their reactions about finding out about Sarah, but it's also that Ellis knew about Sarah, knew that she left with his dad, and to be fair, he didn't bring her back to town. She came back to town on her own by going through one of those trees. She just happened to end up back here. I think it's pretty significant. I mean, I think she talked about ending up in the church's basement. I think so. Because once again, they can take you anywhere, but I do think it's interesting if that's, I mean, maybe it took her back to town and she just snuck back to Cautry's basement of the church. I don't remember the specifics of it. Because if she went back there, it just probably happened to be serendipity. But if she just happened to like pop back in town, got scared, and ended up like going to church, that makes a lot of sense too. But either way. And Fatima has every right to be pissed because it's like, right, you could have kept it from other people, sure, but you should have told me. But even then, it's still kind of well, even that's not okay because of what Sarah did. She's a murderer. People had every right to know it wasn't on Boyd to keep that. But, as Ellis tried to defend his dad felt like he had no other option. He was doing what he thought he could do. He thought he was doing the best thing that he could at the time, so. But he could tell, like, right, there was something else going on here. He's like, it's not about Sarah or my dad, it's about something else. And I was like, yeah, you could tell. I was like, it must be with like Fatima like having it up to here with this place, like, because at least the wedding was supposed to be like that thing to kind of like keep her grounded. Once again, be that thing she can hold on to, which obviously was very rocky this episode because that almost came shattering down because of what happened to Ellis. Fight got into like thing happened because of like the food and stuff. Dale's an asshole. Wasn't he? If I remember correctly, Dale was also the same asshole in Colony House last season. He is such a dick. Well, basically, he knows what it is. He's like, right, I know that we're running out of food. He thought like Elgin is trying to take food, but it's like, he's like, no, I'm just getting food out of my bag. But also it's like, oh, Elgin didn't know what was what. If he'd known, like, he's like, wait, we're limited on food. Like, he didn't know that. No one knew. That's the point. But Dale is there running his mouth about everything, swinging the knife around when people are trying to calm him down. And he stabs Ellis. I love him. Like, hey, Ellis, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm like, why are you so nonchalant about the fact that you stabbed him and he's bleeding a lot through his shirt? It's like, you stabbed me, you dickhead. They kicked him out. I don't know whether he's in town or did they just kick him out to a different room. I would assume they would kick him out of the house, but it's nighttime, so I doubt they did that. They probably just like kicked him out of that particular room, like send him somewhere. So they need to get him to Christie, but it's nighttime, so Elgin steps up. I was like, hey, I think for Elgin, it's like, right, I've been kind of this scared person. It's time for me to nut up and help. So he ends up getting to the van. They end up getting, I was kind of scared because obviously you can hear the screeching in the background. It's so fascinating that despite what they are, they still keep up their human appearance and they're slow. They don't ever go full blown monster and attack you. Like they didn't rant, like that was obviously, especially with the way the camera kept panning around between all three of them. And, all you could see is like the obviously it's like that scene was most likely like all CGI. I can only assume. Green screened, but still it is that neat because they did a similar kind of like, I think it kind of did a very similar thing with that chase sequence in season 3 of Hawkeye. They did a very similar sequence there with how like it was in the car. The camera just kept turning from like Clint and Kate to everything else. But either way, it was kind of a similar thing. And I was scared like, oh, these things are going to jump out. But they never did. I guess it's like, maybe these things aren't like supernatural fast. Like, yeah, they're strong and monstrous and going to rip you to pieces, sure. But maybe it's not a situation of like, they're like fast and can leap. Or I don't know. Maybe that's just like maybe there are rules to how they have to handle combat/confrontation thing, so maybe they can be scary, but they have to be the slow pursuing like killers that they are, I guess. I don't know. Luckily, got to the hospital. They started helping out Ellis. Timing couldn't be more interesting because you had Boyd having this whole conversation with Cautry, because I got to circle back to that, and Cautry talking about how much Boyd has changed. He was the hard ass that he was. He was stubborn. He would have never asked for help, but now this Boyd is, and this, because it's like, Boyd admits, it's like, yeah, because things are different. I'm different. The circumstances are different. I can't handle this on my own, especially when I don't think I'm crazy, but I can admit how crazy I sound with everything, so... And even Kenny being like, yo, you're going to stay down here until I can prove that you aren't a danger. But Ellis being stabbed, that he's dying. Luckily, everything's kind of going well. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? Well, he needs a blood transfusion. The moment they're like, oh, he's going to need blood. And I was like, oh, boy, you'd assume it'd be a familial situation. So it's like, hey, Boy is the perfect donor, but I'm like, yeah, not the best time to be a donor. And it's like, I don't want what's inside of me to end up in Ellis, and everyone's pressuring him to the point Kenny pulls out a gun on him. But then Mario notices, like, holy shit, there is stuff under his skin. It's like, well, what do we do? And Kenny being the MVP, like, yo, Martin transferred it to you, right? Transfer it to me. And, then you'll be able to help Ellis, and then we'll go from there. But for him, it's like, this thing inside me is growing. I can't put you through that. I was about to say, are we about to do this to Kenny? Because it seemed like it went to Boyd for a reason. But then Boyd's like, wait a minute. It has to go in a body. I was like, yo, are we about to? And he goes out there and confronts one of the monsters. It's one of the ones that you see the most, I think. I don't think it's exactly this. Well, it might be, because they did show him again in the preview. The one that ended up getting on the bus and ended up killing that old couple. He is one of those. I think he's even in one of like the promotional poster for this season. I think he's the one on the front cover, like looking at. I think it's the same guy, but it might be a different one that looks a little similar. Either way, Boyd's like, yeah, you want to like mess with us? Want to knock on our windows? Want to knock on our doors? I'm here. And he cuts his hand, and I was like, oh boy, is this going to go the way he thinks it will? So he ends up slicing the thing's throat, but no blood comes pouring out, because it's like, right, they're not alive. There's no blood pumping in them. Like, once again, they're like just wearing, either that's just supposed to be the natural state of like, right, they don't have blood pumping through them, or is it just because they're wearing, because the thing is, when they go monstrous, they shape shift into their true form. So that's why I was like, it's not even like a skinwalker thing of like, oh, they're wearing this. Because that was always my thought, that they were wearing the skin of their victims or something, or people who've been here before. But it's like, no, for your face to shift into what it is, it's like, it's got to be a transformation. But the fact is, there's no blood at all. It's because they're not living beings. There's something else, which is interesting. And I mean, I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. When those things get shot, they never bleed. So. But I was like, oh, because there's no blood, I was like, will it work? And Boyd does his thing, but I'm like, did it work? And it's like, oh, I enjoy this game. And then the thing starts freaking out. I was like, what? And then it drops, potentially dead. I was like, did they just find a way to kill these things? They've never been able to kill these things. That's always why, well, you kind of have to run. They've stabbed it. None of that has ever worked before. This is the first time where you're like, wait, did it actually work? And so now they're able to do the blood transfusion, so it works in the end. So Ellis is okay. But now that's the big question of, is it dead? And it's like, well, we'll know soon enough, because they have to wait. And what I think is interesting, because at first I was wondering, like, the way the creatures all turned to the one that was dying, I was like, oh, like, is it going to turn them against each other? Like, will they kind of turn against this because maybe they register it as a living being because of those worms or something? But no, they just left it, where it's just kind of like, oh, no fun and games anymore now, huh? You aren't all whispered. And I think it speaks volumes. They didn't even go near the door. The moment that compatriot died, they just moved on. They're like, I don't know if that was supposed to be like the closest thing to fear these things I've ever had. Like, wait, the fuck? One of us died? But they're like so calm about it. But they're staring around almost like, wait, what? Because they couldn't fathom it. It's like, once again, none of them have ever died. They've always been the predators in this situation. And for the first time in God knows how long, if ever, they're the prey. It makes you wonder, had Martin... Well, no, because obviously they were still in Martin, so it never crossed Martin's mind to transfer it to one of those creatures. I mean, it probably happened. He probably got those worms inside of him when he was chained up, so he was never in a situation where he could do that. So, but now it's like, so if one of us goes over and touches that body again with an open wound, will we get the worms back? Like, that might be the only means of doing this. Like, we have to find a way to maybe weaponize it. I mean, maybe even Chrissy could take some samples and we start, like, putting this in, like, dipping our bullets and blades in this blood that is contaminated. Like, right, we just constantly come back to the source of draining the blood out of this thing. I don't know. But that's also the thing. Once again, they don't bleed. So do they even really have like a system that allows for blood? Is it just like, oh, the Boyd's blood went into its system, and who's to say that won't eventually burn out? So it's like, might have to get those sooner rather than later. I have no idea. We don't know what the rules of this is. This can change everything. Like I said, maybe it's permadeath. Maybe the thing just knocked on its ass for a while. We won't know until like they get a proper examination. Might be the first time where like Christy might need to perform an autopsy on this situation, so. Oh boy. Whew. But luckily, Ellis is okay, but then we had the reveal about Fatima where she was scared. Like, hey, I thought I almost lost Ellis, and we find out what's really kind of been on her mind. I wonder, is that what kind of why those things really got to her, like in episode 1? Or maybe that was 2. Yeah, I think that might have been episode 2. Like, the reason why they were able to really get to her is she might have already been pregnant at the time, and she's been wrestling with that because, like, having a baby here, like, who knows if that's ever really happened. Obviously, people have had children here, but it's like, yeah, those children were already older, so no one's ever been in a situation where they've had a baby here, and it's like, this ain't a conducive environment to be having a baby, so I think a lot of that's like, really, am I going to raise a child? So maybe that's why she was a little more receptive to accepting Ellis's marriage proposal, because of it. It gave her a little more hope, and you know, with the baby situation, if she knew at the time, like maybe after all this stuff, like maybe it's in between then and this whole finding out about Sarah that really kind of because it's like, hey, Sarah did attempt to kill a child, so makes you not want to bring a child in this world. I mean, you have a multitude of reasons not to want to bring a child into this whole situation, so there's just a lot to take away from all of this. It's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good